Alina sat in the back of the black limousine, her hands trembling in her lap as she clutched the edge of her white wedding gown. The fabric, delicate and expensive, felt heavy against her skin like a cage trapping her in a life she had never wanted. Her face was wet with tears, but she tried to wipe them away before anyone could see. Cameras had flashed all night, reporters whispering about the young, beautiful bride marrying one of the wealthiest men in America, Robert Langston, a 78-year-old billionaire, her husband. Alina shuddered at the thought. She was only 22. She had dreamed of love, passion, a man who would hold her close at night and whisper sweet promises into her ear. Instead, she had been sold to a man old enough to be her grandfather. Her mother had wept tears of joy, her father had shaken hands with Robert like they had struck gold, and her younger siblings had clapped without understanding that their sister was being sacrificed for their survival. Robert had paid off all their debts. Their house, which was on the verge of foreclosure, was now secure. Her mother's medical bills were covered. Her father was no longer drowning in loans, all because she had agreed to marry him. But at what cost? Alina squeezed her hands together, trying to stop them from shaking. The limousine glided through the iron gates of Robert's mansion, a monstrous estate that looked more like a palace than a home. The tall marble columns loomed in the dim lights, casting long shadows on the driveway. As the car came to a stop, the driver stepped out and opened the door. Cold air rushed in, making her shiver. Or maybe it wasn't the cold. Maybe it was the fear. Robert stepped out first, his aged hands gripping the car door as he moved slowly. He turned to her and held out his hand. "Come, my dear," he said, in his deep, gravelly voice. Alina hesitated, then placed her trembling hand in his. His skin was cold, his grip strong despite his age. She forced a smile, knowing that cameras might still be watching. The world loved a beautiful bride marrying a billionaire, whether they believed it was true love or not. Inside, the mansion was eerily quiet. The air smelled of polished wood, expensive cologne, and something else, something unfamiliar and unsettling. The butler gave them a small nod before disappearing down the hallway, leaving them alone. Alina's pulse quickened. This was it, the moment she had been dreading since she signed her name on that marriage contract. Robert turned to her, his pale blue eyes watching her carefully. "Let me show you to your room," he said. She swallowed. "My room?" He smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Did you think you'd be sharing a bed with me?" Alina's breath caught in her throat. That was exactly what she had thought. That was what she had feared. "You're young, Alina," he continued, leading her up the grand staircase. "I know this. Marriage isn't what you wanted. I won't force you into anything you don't want." She blinked, trying to process his words. "Then why did you marry me?" They reached the top of the stairs, and he paused, turning to look at her fully. "I have my reasons," he said simply. Then he continued walking. Alina followed, confusion swirling in her mind. He stopped in front of a door and pushed it open, revealing a luxurious bedroom. The walls were lined with soft cream wallpaper. The bed was massive, with gold-trimmed sheets, and the windows overlooked the vast garden outside. "This is your room," Robert said. "You can decorate it however you like." She hesitated in the doorway. "And you?" "I have my own room." He smiled slightly. "You are my wife, Alina, but I have no intention of being your husband in any way you don't want." Her heart pounded. Was this a trick? Some kind of test? "Then why did you marry me?" she asked. Again, he sighed. "Sleep now. We'll talk tomorrow." Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, utterly shocked. This was not what she had expected at all. Alina stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the empty hallway where Robert had disappeared. The silence in the mansion was deafening. This wasn't how she had imagined her first night as a married woman, certainly not with a billionaire husband. She had expected the worst, prepared herself for an unbearable night of pretending. But instead, he had left her alone. Slowly, she stepped into her new bedroom, running her fingers over the polished wooden furniture. The room was beautiful, lavish beyond anything she had ever known, but it felt hollow. She sat on the edge of the massive bed, her hands resting on the silk sheets. The fabric was cool under her fingertips, and for the first time in days, she allowed herself to breathe. Maybe this wouldn't be as terrible as she thought. Robert was old, very old. Maybe he truly had no interest in being a husband in the way men usually were. Maybe he had just wanted a young, beautiful woman by his side for appearances. Rich men did that all the time, didn't they? But something didn't feel right. His words kept echoing in her head. I have my reasons. What reasons? A shiver ran down her spine. She decided not to dwell on it tonight. Her body was exhausted, her mind overwhelmed, and for now, the only thing she wanted was sleep. She pulled off the heavy wedding dress and changed into a silk nightgown that had been left for her. It felt expensive, too expensive for a girl who had spent her whole life wearing second-hand clothes. Sliding under the sheets, she stared at the ceiling, her mind swirling with thoughts. Her family was safe now. That was what mattered. Even if her life felt like it didn't belong to her anymore. She forced her eyes shut, willing herself to sleep. She woke with a start. Something was wrong. The room was pitch black, but she could hear breathing, not hers, someone else's. Her body went rigid. She wasn't alone. Slowly, she turned her head toward the door. The faint glow of moonlight barely illuminated the figure standing in the shadows. Her breath hitched. It was Robert. He was just standing there, watching her. A chill crawled down her spine. Robert, she whispered, her voice shaky. He didn't respond. He didn't move. Her pulse pounded in her ears. She gripped the blanket tighter, her heart racing. Is something wrong? She tried again. Silence. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. I just wanted to make sure you were comfortable, he said, his voice eerily calm. Alina swallowed hard. I am fine. He nodded slowly, but he didn't leave. He stood there for a few more moments, his face unreadable in the darkness. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, shutting the door softly behind him. Alina didn't move. Her entire body was stiff with fear. What the hell had just happened? She didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Something was very, very wrong with Robert Langston. Alina spent the rest of the night lying still, wide awake, staring at the door. Her body was frozen in fear, every muscle tense. Why had Robert been watching her? The way he stood there, silent, unmoving, it wasn't normal. It wasn't the harmless old man act he had put on earlier. Something about it sent ice through her veins. Was he testing her, trying to see if she would react? When the first light of morning peeked through the curtains, Alina finally allowed herself to move. She slipped out of bed cautiously, her heart still pounding. Everything in the room looked normal. No signs that anything had happened. Maybe she had imagined, maybe she was overthinking. But deep down, she knew she wasn't. She quickly changed into the simple yet elegant dress that had been laid out for her. It was clear Robert had spared no expense in making sure she looked like the perfect billionaire's wife.